Hey everybody, how's it going? So yeah, we have a guest on today. We have Kenzo. I don't want to butcher your last name.
Shibata. Yeah,
Shibata.
perfect.
Okay, all right, cool. And host of Class Times. It's a stream you could find on Twitch. I recently did it over the weekend. It was pretty fun. Unfortunately, along with Nomiki Khan's, we might have hijacked the last 15 minutes of it a little, but it was a good time. We really enjoyed it, and I want to have you immediately back on because you mentioned something in the beginning that I get all my news from Twitter,
Mhm.
and I've been trying to cut back on Twitter for my mental health.
Yeah.
And what's been happening is the side effect of that is that I've been missing out on a lot of news because that was the one good thing about it. I was getting all my news from there, so I didn't realize this until you mentioned it. But about the Chicago teachers union and strike and all that business, and after you mentioned it, of course, this is how things go. When someone tells you about something, suddenly you start spotting it. I started seeing uh, that she gave an insane press conference. I
Yes.
thought,
The
yeah,
meltdown
and
conference.
oh yeah. So if you don't mind, if you can just tell us who you are and what you do and what your connection to all this is, and then give us like a quick um rundown of the current situation.
All right, cool. So I'm thank you for having me on, T. Appreciate this. Trying to get the message out as much as possible. The mayor, as you saw, did a national news like blitz, including that press conference. So we're trying to dig in everywhere we can, every platform we can to talk about these issues. So where we're at now in Chicago is so I'm a high school teacher. I teach civics and history and English in the near west side of Chicago. My students mainly come from the south and the west side, working class black and brown students. I also send my kid to a Chicago public school, and my wife is on the local school council there. So we're like extremely enmeshed with the school system here. And I've been teaching. I started teaching in 2003. I took about 10 years off of teaching to work for the Chicago Teachers Union doing digital media and the Illinois Federation of Teachers as their media director. And then 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to go back to teaching. And part of the reason why is because my job when I was working for the unions was anytime some union in my state went on strike, I had to go there and help them with media. So it was about, I mean, it was going to give me a heart attack. Like I was working with people on the worst day of their life constantly and, running around the state, I have a wife and a kid. So I thought going back to the classroom was going to be chill. But then I ran for executive board. So I'm on the union's executive board. My title is high school functional vice president. So I'm part of the negotiating team, even though I teach full time. Whenever they have negotiations with this greater bargaining team, which is our executive board, I'm part of that. And so I was one of the organizers for our strike in 2019. And what we might be seeing now is another strike, a second strike in 15 months. And this strike will be over the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, and her entire appointed school board trying to force teachers and students back into in-person education. And they've been pushing and pushing and pushing us to prepare for in-person after we've done since the pandemic started. We've been doing virtual teaching. They've been threatening to put us back in, and now we're in the middle of a cool down period. The deadline was 2 weeks ago for all of the elementary teachers to go back to the classroom, and what we've done is continued to teach online. And what we voted for as a union a couple weeks ago was that we would continue as a union, so every teacher would continue to teach online. And if the Board of Education kicks us out of our Google Classrooms, so basically locking us out, then we would go into a strike. And that means people like me who teach high school who wouldn't be affected. We would also be withdrawing our labor as a collective action. And This would be very unprecedented. Our two mayors ago, we had kind of the end of the machine. We had the end of Mayor Daley's reign, and he had labor peace for 25 years. We can dig into a little bit more later, I think, about how that happened, because the machine was very different in the way it operated. And then when Rahm Emanuel was our mayor, to kind of put a bottom line on it, he tried to bring DC politics to Chicago, and it didn't work. And he forced us on our first strike in 25 years because of that. He governed us as if like you can lie to us and gaslight us and then write press releases saying the opposite. Well, if you're in DC, you can do that because you don't have the angry mob in your backyard. When you're in Chicago, we march in his house constantly. I live not too far from his neighborhood. If I see police helicopters in the sky, I know someone is marching on Rahm. And now with Lori Lightfoot, we might have two strikes, within her first term. So things have definitely like amped up in the past few years.
Yeah. And whatever happened after that press conference when she was kind of giving that ultimatum? She gave that crazy ultimatum.
Yeah. She moved on the deadline 3 times since that press conference. So I think she knows that she's outnumbered. The way that this mayor works is she won as an unknown in Chicago with 18% of the vote that got her into a runoff. What the last mayoral election in Chicago was very close to like what the madness we saw in the Democratic primary. There was about 25 people running at one point because Rahm Emanuel decided he wasn't going to run again. Basically, I think because activists made his life very miserable toward the end. He hid the murder of a black teenager named Laquan McDonald to be reelected the first time. As soon as that came out, that not only that happened, but like the footage came out and people relived it, and they associated closely with him. The state's attorney that helped him hide it, she was voted out of office immediately. And then I have to say, he probably looked at the numbers and thought he wasn't going to be able to win. And Lori Lightfoot, she doesn't have any elected record. She was a prosecutor, which is already a red flag for me, and a corporate attorney, which is a double red flag. But her platform she ran on was the same as what the teachers union and every progressive organization was asking for: higher minimum wage, 15 minimum wage, returning the schools back to the communities through an elected school board, a nurse in every school, a social worker in every school. So we didn't endorse her because the union did the due diligence and saw that she was a prosecutor and that she was a corporate lawyer with no record, and she has no accountability because no one in Chicago knew her. So we ended up endorsing this person named Tony Preckwinkle, and Tony Preckwinkle is the Cook County Board president and also the head of the Cook County Democratic Party. And what has happened in Chicago is we used to have a very strong machine back throughout the 60s and 70s. And then in the 80s, we had some amazing progressive grassroots leadership through Harold Washington and the coalition behind him. He had, this incredible coalition of not just liberals, but leftists. Folks that were just fighting for justice, for years. And, he died in office, unfortunately. And I think that was a lesson for us too. And I think that was a lesson that some of us who were supporting Bernie, we were ready for that, because when Harold died, he left a huge space behind him, and the coalition behind him, they all started at each other's throats, like forced the vote almost parallels. And that allowed Mayor Daley's son, who previously ran against Harold and lost, who was also a state's attorney, who hid police torture. That guy's a real scumbag. He then got into office because people were looking for, if you look at like Trump, you make Chicago great again. And Daley, to his credit, had really great like public works projects, but he also privatized schools and raised public housing and replaced it with what do they call it? Mixed income housing, which meant that people were put on lists and they got tired of waiting on lists and moved out to the suburbs and downstate because they couldn't afford to live in Chicago anymore. People who lived here for generations. And so that machine birthed a lot of huge scumbags, to put it lightly. And Tony Preckwinkle was associated with one in particular named Ed Burke, who is probably the most corrupt alderman in Chicago. He's been in office for about 50 years. He has $16 million in his.
That's saying a lot in Chicago to be the most corrupt in Chicago.
Yes.
That's
but
impressive.
Like, there are national connections to this dude. He was Donald Trump's real estate lawyer in Chicago.
Oh.
So that big eyesore that everyone, takes a picture of them flipping off, that says, the big Trump building, that was Ed Burke defending Trump against the city because the city didn't want that. Rahm didn't want that. But the real estate clout, got him, with that. So, side note also about Ed Burke was he is currently indicted. He was allegedly, I have to say allegedly, because he has $16 million, shook down a Burger King to that wanted to expand its parking lot. And to show you what a big little city this is, that was the same Burger King where Laquan McDonald was murdered by the police in the parking lot there. So that's the kind of politics that we have here. And Tony Preckwinkle was being associated very closely with that. And, kind of my analysis on that is, so to make it anywhere in politics for decades here, you had to be part of the machine. And that meant you could bring things back to your community. And if you were doing the mayor's bidding and you were, a leader in your community, you might become an alderman and then you dole out public jobs. And for a lot of Black and Latino community leaders, that was the only way to bring things back to their community for a very long time. And what I've seen when we've kind of moved from a neighborhood-based machine to now a neoliberal machine, a lot of Black and Latino leaders have risen to the top, but they are the ones also taking the fall in a lot of these situations. We had this county assessor, very corrupt guy, Joe Barrios, but he was a working class neighborhood kid who found his way at the top of the pyramid scheme at one point. Not to say that what he did was great, but what happened to Tony Preckwinkle then was she was kind of left holding the bag when all the real bad people left the party and are working in the public sector, or the private sector. I mean, so by the time she was facing Lori Lightfoot looked like the reformer, and Tony Preckwinkle had all this machine baggage. Now, one advantage I really saw, and the reason why I think it was smart for the unions to get behind Tony Preckwinkle, was that the machine was dying, and the only people behind her were the progressive organizations and the unions. So she would have been accountable to us. Lori Lightfoot doesn't have a base anywhere. So that's where we're at now. And because Lori Lightfoot doesn't care about political damage the way a regular politician would. We're at this long standstill.
So we say she don't care about political damage. Is it because she's not really a lifelong politician? She can just go back to becoming a corporate lawyer or something else? Is that what it is? Because she doesn't feel like a real politician.
No,
but not in a good way. She doesn't feel like a real one, but in a way that it's because no one even heard of her, it seems, really, until she just kind of appeared on the scene. And I think what really kind of helped with the mainstream media was the optics. I mean, she was black, she was a woman, and she was queer. So I noticed, when she won, people who I know based on following these accounts had no idea who she was. We're like, yay, won representation. Don't lie to me. You don't know who this lady is. You just see a black queer woman winning. But then, I started following her, and soon after, there were a couple of things before this where I kind of realized, okay, she's really kind of playing a game here, and it's a very disappointing game, but
Mhm.
it's basically she's not really she doesn't really seem to have progressive politics, no matter what her identity is. But I wasn't expecting it to be this disappointing though. Like the union thing, I think is
Mhm.
was pretty bad. But I'm curious about the machine dying because that is the one good thing that seemed like was happening from her winning was that she didn't seem attached to any machine.
Mhm.
And you mentioned that the machine is dying. Why is the Chicago machine dying? Or do you think it's possible it's just taking a rest, or do you think this is a permanent state of things?
Yeah, 1 second. I just got to restart my camera.
Okay, I thought you were holding your face really, really still. I was
I've seen that a few times on streams where you're like, "Are you still there?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just
okay.
kind of
I
dazing
thought
off
you
a
were
bit."
just really intent on what I was saying. Then I realized,
I was listening.
oh no, he's just
Um,
frozen.
yeah, maybe the camera thought that I was frozen. Just 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Um, as far as the machine goes, I think that it's dead in the way that we normally would, expect a machine to operate. So, what I call what we have now in Chicago is the neoliberal machine, which it means that here we are. Instead of the power base coming up from the communities, it's 1 moment. Okay, here I am. It's coming up from the top. So, you know, Mayor Daley is terrible as they both were. Original Daley and then Richard M. Daley. They had some accountability to these communities. They had to deliver. And the reason why they kept in power was streets continued to be plowed, for example. And in fact, what killed that machine, the first death of that machine was when Richard Daley the first died, and he was replaced by someone who could not take care of the streets when we had a real bad blizzard the year I was born, 79. Um, they the Chicagoans are very serious about like bread and butter issues, and they weren't able to deliver, and that or his screwing that up then led to a Jane Byrne, who was kind of like a progressive. I think she's probably similar to Lori Lightfoot without the kind of bloodthirsty prosecutor ness to her. But like she was kind of a lakefront liberal, as they say. Like, as long as their taxes don't get up too high, they're fine with somewhat integrating schools, and things like that, but not fully, not economically integrating schools. Um, and in fact, one of the things that Jane Byrne did is the same kind of shtick that Cory Booker did. She moved into the most notorious as far as like news media coverage, public housing called Cabrini Green. She moved into one of the buildings for a while as like a publicity stunt, like Cory Booker did years later.
Yeah.
She left like a real damaging impact on that building, though, because the building where she stayed in, her security detail was worried, so they sealed off one side of the building, and usually there's doors on both sides. It's a high rise, densely populated building, but they wanted to close off one end so her security detail then can kind of ride back and forth on the other side of the building. She only stayed in there, I believe, for a month, and then when she moved out, she moved back into her own house, and then that building became like a fortress for the gangs that were running those housing projects. So what she did was she left something that was more, somewhat safe and made it very unsafe. And that became territory that people fought over because they could store there and they could do all sorts of things there because there's only one set of doors. So like that kind of superficial shit that ends up killing people. I think they're kind of akin to that. And then, she led way for Harold Washington, because I think the people, they saw how the machine was broken and the liberal reformers couldn't do anything. So Harold Washington ran a campaign of grassroots, like, this is going to be your city if I run. And he made a lot of really incredible democratic reforms in the way the city was governed.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, Lori Lightfoot. I don't really know what her national reputation is now. I mean, also because I don't think we're in a climate where even among national political pundits, they really kind of care about nuts and bolts stuff. They just kind
Mhm.
of go against, are you a Democrat or not? What's your identity? What's your um publicity like, etc. So I mean, I see more coverage of Halloween costume or outfit than I really have of this thing with
Mhm.
the union. And I was wondering, like, how has the media locally been treating her? Is it very critical of her? Is it in the tank for her?
So this
How has it been?
is the interesting thing about this is the media at first, well, the editorial boards of the Chicago Sun-Times and the Tribune, the two major papers, are just straight trash. These are just right-wing people who go to cocktail parties with right-wing and libertarian people. So we just know they're going to have our heads on pikes no matter what we do. The reporters, however, they played it very fairly, and down the middle, from the beginning, which frustrates us. But because Mayor Lori Lightfoot's office is so bad with dealing with media and having this adversarial relationship with the media, that reporters, I don't want to say are turning on them, but they try to ask straight questions and then they don't get the answers back. And then so the reporters will write straight reporting, but they'll tweet out the way the mayor's office is treating them. And, as someone that worked in media for 10 years myself, like, they just keep making, what do they call them? Unforced errors. They keep doing things that should be no brainers. Like, they will like promise an exclusive to the Sun Times or the Tribune over something that you don't need to have. You don't need to like keep under wraps. And so like they'll tweet out like, why didn't you offer this to all the media? Like, you're doing this wrong. Like, reporters are talking about how they're doing media wrong. And meanwhile, like me, I'm a communist and I don't mince my words on Twitter. I'll call people scumbags. And mainstream reporters are reaching out to me. I was in the New York Times the other week because the mayor's office, they know, aren't giving them the straight answers. And so part of the reason why I think she did all that national media over the weekend was because the reporters here are pissed off at her. And
Mm.
they can't say that, but I'll say that for them. They're pissed off at, being lied to, having information withheld from them that shouldn't be. And when she goes on like the Morning Joe show or MSNBC, I think some of what you're talking about, T, about identity, that plays into why they just give her a platform that where they don't edit her at all. But it kind of makes me think of when Adolph Reed talks about, when he talks about racial representatives. We have a very strong Black female leader in the Chicago Teachers Union, Stacey Davis Gates. And the way that identity is used to buoy Lori Lightfoot has never been used to buoy her. And so the union, no matter what, we have to produce reams and reams of research to get papers to report our side on things, when Lori Lightfoot can just go on the news and say, we offered them vaccines, which is bullshit. Like, the Chicago public schools and the public health plan to get us vaccinated doesn't even start for 2 weeks. So local news, they know that. And part of it too, because I've worked with the local press pool here, a lot of them have kids that they send to Chicago public schools. And during strikes, they get really frustrated because they're literally like scrambling to find childcare, and they don't want to have someone lie to their face about this stuff. And it gets kind of personal. And this pandemic is, I think, just going to exasperate that. Like, if we go on strike, how do you get childcare during a pandemic? How do you ask for that? I don't think Lori Lightfoot understands that she's shitting in her own backyard when she lies to the media here and lies to her neighbors. DC, you can do that because she'll say that everyone over the whole country are going to see that. I'm curious what people outside of Chicago think, seeing her with this, just, saying everything bad about the union. but kind of knowing our reputation as a union, but not hearing our voices. So I'm actually curious.
Yeah, I'm curious about all of this. I'm also wondering, well, a couple of things. How you came to your politics, to your activism and etc., and how you think this particular fight fits into the narrative of what's happening with teachers
Hmm.
unions all across the country. Because I feel like lately, I don't know if it's because I'm paying more attention or there's more going on, but I feel like lately there is, to me at least, a lot more um, teachers unions in the news than before, and I get the sense from the outside looking in that what you guys are involved in is much bigger than Chicago.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is, we've gotten better at working with media, but we have the actual material behind it to like prove like we're not just, we don't just have good ideas. We have, solidarity. And the reason why like we've been in the news lately is things have just been ramping up in the past 10 years. Uh, when the Chicago Teachers Union went on strike in 2012, that was the first strike we'd been on in 25 years. And that was the biggest strike at that time. It was about 25,000 members walked out. About 500,000 students were out of school, and that was the first time we showed the amount of power that we had built. And the way that we had built that power was not it wasn't linear. Definitely wasn't linear. Sometimes when you show people you're willing to fight, you lose a little power in the process, but you gain it back. And I think you gain it back a lot more. And we always allied with community partners that were very militant, and we get warnings about that. Um, we were part of to back up a little bit, we were part of a militant caucus, like a group of teachers and other educators within the union that took over leadership in 2012 when we ran Karen Lewis for president. And that was a huge shift in the way we did things. Our union got really calcified and corrupt and just used to big salaries for the staff and expensing out meals and, drinks and things like that. And we were like, enough is enough. We need to have a rank and file led union. And when we first started organizing, it started out as fighting against school closings because schools were being closed, and for no real good reason. They were they were consolidating the district, and they would say that enrollment is down, but in many cases the the numbers were jacked, and then they'd close down schools. The ripple effect of that is you have students that live in these neighborhoods that have unofficially drawn gang lines, and now you have kids crossing those gang lines to go to their new schools. Some kids stopped going to school. Where I was teaching, they tore down like 3 or 4 different developments, public housing developments, and there were just fights every day. And the fights would lead to lower attendance rates. And then when kids would stop showing up to school, then the attendance numbers would go down. They'd shut down that school. So it was just this misery just compounding upon itself, upon itself. So we took that upon ourselves. And when schools close, it doesn't just affect the teachers, it affects parents and students, everyone in the community. The person selling newspapers on the corner, like, they're impacted, if a school closes. And we allied with some of the most militant groups like Blocks Together, COCO, the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization. These are groups that occupied buildings. COCO went on a hunger strike to keep a school open on the south side. And we would get warnings like, don't work with them, work with the more middle of the road groups, try to find some common ground with the school privatization groups. And we're like, no, fuck that. We didn't take over our union to fall back and do what those before us did. So having those militant folks in the fold, we created this coalition where people weren't afraid to get arrested at actions. We have elementary school teachers that have chained themselves to banks to get money put back into schools. So that militancy, it was so crucial. And the more militant we got, the more power we got. And that, we, after the 2012 strike, all of us then started going out to other locals and training them on how to organize with their communities, how to do this thing called bargaining for the common good, where you bargain in your contract, not just, pay and benefits, or not even just classroom things, but like rent control. Like one of the things that we fought for in our last contract and we didn't get was a fight for rent control. However, we put rent control on the table when we were negotiating. What we ended up with was a lot more funding for schools that had high numbers of homeless students. So that's kind of how you do that with the bargaining, is you ask very audacious goals. You show the power behind it by showing that you can strike. Hopefully you don't have to, but we did. And by striking, we got extra money into those, higher need schools. All of this definitely paints my politics along the way, like seeing how, the power of having very clear class-based demands, but not limiting your politics to class-based politics has just been so crucial. Intersectionality has been so crucial. A lot of this work is, led by Black and Brown and Indigenous folks, because while a lot of folks in our profession aren't prepared, I'd say, for like the proletariation to make us into proles. I always get that word wrong. Of our profession. A lot of these folks that I teach with aren't really ready for that, and the kind of fights we gotta have.
Can you elaborate on what that means? Because I think I know what you mean, but just in case some people don't, what you mean by the proletarianization of the profession? Because I think that's a trend that's kind of happening to a lot of things, and you'd be surprised. Even like a lot of white collar, traditionally thought of as white collar jobs. I'm a lawyer. That's happening with law too. It's not just something that is in the service industry. It's in everything.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think was a very bad idea for teachers unions to pick up on in organizing was this concept that we were a union of professionals. And I think the reason why that part of the organizing pitch was part of it was some teachers were like, when the idea of teachers getting collective bargaining was a newer idea, a lot of teachers were like, well, we're not like Teamsters. We're not painters. We're not carpenters. We're professionals. And so, the folks organizing them said, well, we are different. We are a union of professionals. And actually, the American Federation of Teachers had that as a tagline for years. And we would march in the streets with a banner that said that. And I hated it so much. But what it did was it allowed for us to have contracts that were good, contracts where we got paid far more than our sisters and brothers working in the as aides or as clerks or as janitors in the buildings. And what we're seeing now through the opening of charter schools, the consolidation of schools, vouchers and things like that, our profession is getting proletarianized. And what I mean by that is we're like kind of like what happened to the adjuncts. Like teachers, it becomes more precarious work when you just want to become a teacher and the only thing you do is work at a non-union charter school where they fire every teacher at the end of the year, so they have to renegotiate their pay. And the only thing fighting that right now are our unions. And I think we're at this crossroads in our unions now where we have two choices. We can either try to fight to be like in the PMC, to fight to be like back into that union of professionals, which I think that time is kind of over.
Yeah. I think it's over for a lot of fields.
Absolutely. Or like, or we're going to unite with all workers and, fight for them as hard as we fight for ourselves. And, I think the latter is what we need to do.
And I think people are going to have to get over any type of residual elitism or snobism that's keeping them from doing that, because whether you want to or not, we're all getting forced into that role anyway, so you might as well embrace it and form a fighting force based on it, because
Mhm.
yeah, what do you want to in that? Where there's the professors are a great example. Like professors used to be the kind of distinguished thing, and now so many of them are becoming adjuncts, and or I saw a stat recently that most PhDs are going to have to accept that they're not even going to get a job in academia,
Yeah.
or if they want to stay in academia, they're going to have to really lower their expectations. And it's like, I think a lot of this writing was on the wall, but the idea was always that, oh, getting replaced by robots or technology, that's something that happens to uneducated people.
Mhm.
Technology is not going to squeeze uh, this profession, my profession. So it's not my problem. And it's becoming everybody's problem for
Yeah,
sure.
it becomes such a hindrance to organizing in higher ed. That was part of my job when I was with the Illinois Federation of Teachers. And in some schools, you'll see adjuncts and full-time tenure and tenure track professors work as a union. It's usually in smaller places where there isn't um, as much division, but like the University of Illinois in Champaign is this university that they have some professors in mainly in business and also in technology where they get paid ungodly amounts of money, just tons of money to do that because they have these reputations. And the reason why they have these reputations is in the summer months and on their breaks, they work for investment firms, hedge funds as like these academic experts. So like some of these people are, making millions of dollars. And so like they see no reason to unite with these adjuncts who are actually teaching their classes and grading their papers and all that. Because if they were to shake up the boat, that would mean they would lose out. The potential for them to losing out a lot. And the science is there too. Like that is a campus that is definitely tale of two cities. And when I was working with them, the adjuncts were fighting for $14,000 a year as their salary because the bosses wanted to negotiate below that because they said some are worth more than others. And it was like very stark. You see the jackets with the patches on the sleeves and like, professors rolling in money, and then, adjuncts in their 20s that were like on the line for almost 2 weeks so they can get insurance. Um, and the ruling class has done a good job fucking up higher ed.
Yeah, I mean they've done a good job of fucking up everything, and now with apps, I just feel like everything's just gonna become uh like it's just like a race to the bottom. Like
Yep.
taxi drivers or car drivers are being gutted by neoliberalism. Office space with WeWork, the whole education system with charter schools, and I mean like this is a big problem, and it's a trickle up problem, and you're gonna
Mhm.
start seeing it with business executives. Eventually you're gonna get, no one's gonna be saved from this, but everyone, it's like that old cliche thing. I know it's such a cliche, but that whole thing about they came for so and so and I didn't care because I
Mhm.
was so and so. I usually a lot of times I think it's misused, but I think it's a good example. And I want to know, like, how were you guys, because I know someone who used to do a lot of graduate union work, and one thing that was interesting about her work for graduate worker union was that she would tell me one weekend, hey, I'm traveling to this state to help this union. Like there's very much a national coordination among those.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you guys had something similar. Like someone put on the screen that they don't think the New York Teachers Union fights as well as the Chicago Union. That they feel like they just kind of throw up their hands a lot. And I was wondering if there's like national coordination that happens, if some cities tend to have a better reputation or more leverage, than others. Like for example, I don't know if what he says about New York is true, but I also don't know if there's something about the context or whatever that gives the New York people less leverage, so that there's an actual nuts and bolts reason why they can't be as good, things like that. So if you can give me an idea what the national scene is like and how you guys, if at all, coordinate.
I'm going to give a really short bottom line answer and then back up.
Okay.
The reason why the United Federation of Teachers in New York is so weak is that they allow retirees to vote in elections.
Mm.
And what happens is they have a machine. It's an airtight machine. We had a machine run our leadership in Chicago for a long time, but like they didn't have the foresight to recruit the next generation the way that the UFT in New York does. And they have a machine where like you have to vote to become a member of their elected assembly. You have to be in a certain caucus called the Unity Caucus. You have to vote along party lines. It's like it's like a dem cent. Well, no, because there's no democracy there. It's just a centralized organization. Um, you have to vote along the lines of leadership in every vote. You can't be seen with any of the reformers because there's a group called More. They are like us in Chicago, trying to make a more militant union, but it's really hard because their machine only collects people. Like, people retire every year, and then they're still recruiting at the front end. And they do that by, you can't be really a part of the elected assembly unless you're a part of that. And if you show how dedicated you are to the caucus, then you find jobs with the union where they start you out part-time, where you get to leave the classroom half the time and then work for the union half the time. For some of these people, this is it's what do they call it? Like a no-show job, where they
Mm.
basically get paid to not work half the time, and but they're loyalists. And once you become that loyal, you're not only voting with the leadership, but you're enforcers for the leadership. And a lot of those folks then become sergeant of arms at these union meetings, where they will physically remove people if they get a little too vocal or critical. And then, if depending on how resourceful you are and what kind of connections you have, that's the only way you can get into the top tiers of leadership. And that's airtight there. And they keep retirees so retirees can vote on their elections. And the retirees are people for that they tend to be very loyal to that organization. In fact, the Unity Caucus has an office in Boca Raton, Florida, even though this is the New York Teachers Union, because so many retirees move down there and they want to make sure that they're voting and they're active. So they have an office all the way on the other side, the other in Florida. So their machine has made it so the people at the very top make deals with the other people. So the last contract they had, it was their leader, Michael Mulgrew, and de Blasio. Instead of activating all the members and having them organized as a credible threat, it was just two men in a back room hashing out a contract. So it's hard. The kind of organizing they need to do in New York, it's hard because of that machine that they have.
And how about how you feel about the rest of the country and the way that the tide is turning? Do you think Chicago is a model for how the tide is turning, or do you think the New York model is more the norm and more entrenched as you go across the country? Because it seemed like what you guys did was very great, being able to take over the union, but like you said, there was a lack of foresight and self-preservation built into the rules that allowed you to do it. And I was wondering if it's a model that you think most big city teacher unions will be able to imitate, or are they facing more? Is the uphill battle that New York faces the more common scenario?
So we had a huge advantage on our side because that old leadership fractured three ways. They were all in on the take. They were all living high on the union's dole, but eventually they all started pointing fingers at each other because no one wanted to take the blame. The president at the time censured the vice president and eventually kicked him out of the union. He got back through a lawsuit. It cost us a lot of money in dues because all these people were suing each other on top of the fact they were like living these lavish lifestyles. And that leads to, you got all these crooks in a room together. They're eventually going to blame each other because they were crooks. Like they were, they showed that they didn't have scruples, and like they didn't have unity either. So they fractured into three caucuses, and then there was this school reformer caucus that was just not good, just kind of milquetoast liberal, but liberal united with kind of a right wing cop's wife faction in our union that we have,
Yeah.
and then us. And so we were able to force in a runoff because us as core, our caucus, we only campaign on positive messaging. We only said these are the things we want to do in our union. Well, all the other caucuses were just putting out flyers about how each of them suck. So that helped us a lot. And in fact, the anti-core messaging, I gotta dig this out sometime. It was so over the top that no one believed it. They were, I mean, a lot of us are communists and socialists, but the literature was rotten to the core. It was radical core, too radical for CTU. They're going to steal your dues money and give it to community organizers. And it just got so ridiculous with the average member who just wanted us to negotiate good contracts and keep schools from closing, that we were able to get into the runoff. And then this is the politicking we had to do. All of those other groups, we had to negotiate a coalition with them once we got them into the runoffs. And these are like, anti-red people. Not some people I just do not admire at all, to put it lightly. But all we needed was their vote. And what was beautiful about it is we got their vote, and we didn't hire them onto any jobs. We didn't bring them into the coalition. They got pissed about that, but we're not going to I think this goes to one of the broader questions. We're not going to unite with bad people of bad politics.
Yeah, and I want to give you a chance because I know you have to go soon. I think you're doing something after this.
I got a House of Delegates meeting actually.
Yeah. You've been pretty busy, but I wanted to give a chance for you to kind of plug your show and talk about why people should tune into it. So please let people know where to find you, and if time permits, I want to talk about the Dolly Parton new song too. I think it's a very timely. I think it's a very foreboding sign of things to come.
Yeah, so check me out on, it's just class time, very simply, on Twitch. On Sundays we do a panel show, which we're actually tweaking the name a bit, but it's called Pardon the Ignorance right now. T was on it. He's great. On Tuesdays I do a stream called Class Time, which is where right now I'm only talking to CTU members and parents and community organizers through until we get through this fight with the mayor, just because I want to platform everyone in part of it. And then I also have a podcast. If you go to patreon.com/Kenzo Shibata, that's when I kind of go into longer form interviews with people. And it's not a stream, it's a podcast. So yeah, check it out, please.
Oh, and is there any way people can support you, whether in Chicago or outside of Chicago, as far as the fight, anything that people who are concerned can do?
Yeah, I'm gonna drop a link in here in the Twitch.
And do me a favor, send that link by DM too, and I'll put it in the description as
thanks. Well. So this is our mutual aid fund, and this is really critical because what this means is the more money we get in this fund, the more we can prove to the mayor that we could stay out of the classrooms as long as possible. So far, some teachers, not many, have been locked out already. Those are the ones that were asked to report back earlier in January. And we set up this mutual aid fund to help them with their bills, to keep their lights on, their rent, and this kind of solidarity around this. Hopefully, will also just show the mayor, if she sees that we can really pull off a strong strike like we did in last year, she might back off. So appreciate anything you can give to that GoFundMe.
Awesome. And the final thing I want to do is just play this horrible song. And I feel like it very much ties into where things are going, the normalization of how people view work as. And so Dolly Parton tweeted this. She did a song for Squarespace, and it's all about the extra hustle. It's like Work 5 to 9 on your passion projects with the help of Squarespace. Tune into the Super Bowl this Sunday. So she took 9 to 5 and made it 5 to 9. So, which basically means 9 to 9.
Yeah.
We got from 9 to 5 to 9 to 9, and it's being treated as aspirational and whatever. But this is it. Also, it's just not good. It sounds horrible.
Working 5 to 9. You've got
Yeah.
in the vision because it's
And you can feel free to talk during it.
only way to make a living. Gonna change your life. Do something.
I was just joking on Twitter out. This is about podcasters.
Basically.
Because, you know, we work our day jobs and then we do this.
Yeah. And this is exactly what it's like. I'm sure, Kenzo, when you're podcasting, you're dancing, you know, between the streams. As I turn on my computer and it's booting up, this is what I do when I'm waiting to start streaming.
Yeah, I mean, I got a mess behind me. I got all these wires underneath me. It just looks clean because that's where the camera's pointed.
Yeah, make your 5 to 9 full time. I mean, like even our dreams have become like so sad. Like it's so.
And I have no real ill will towards Dolly Parton, but I kind of like the timing of this because there were all these think pieces coming out about how she's like the working class hero.
Yeah,
I'm kind of glad this kind of put a stop to that for a minute.
Yeah, because that's one problem I have with the left take media is that they do this a lot. They did it with Pam Anderson. What's her name? The one from
Pamela Anderson with Assange.
Yeah. Anytime we do one good thing, and I said this the other day, like we always make fun of liberals for as soon as someone says anything anti-Trump, it's like, hey, welcome to the resistance. You're the head of the CIA. It's fine, you know. And I was like, we make fun of that, but I feel like leftists, if you have one good class take, you know, they'll be quick to just make think pieces about you, and it's like it is what it is. So I agree with you. Thanks, Kenzo, for coming out and doing this. Kenzo's doing a lot of appearances, so check out his Twitter so you can always see where he's going to be appearing. Because you've been a busy beaver, man. You've been spreading the gospel on this pretty well.
Yeah. The CTU's representative to the dirtbag left.
Yeah, and if you want to support Champagne Sharks, you know, the scroll on the bottom is all different ways you could support us. But at the very least, just like, comment, share, subscribe. That's always something you can do even if you can't contribute. So yeah, thanks, Kenzo. Thanks everybody in the audience. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be talking to you again sometime soon, Kenzo.
Great. Thanks for having me on, T.
All right, be good.
Take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.